In this video, you will learn about various properties of numbers. So the first property we have is called the closure property. So this property says that if you have numbers a and b, and they're real numbers, then if you add them together, you're going to end up with real numbers. And if you multiply them, you'll also end up with real numbers. So you begin with real numbers, you're going to end with real numbers. And also, this word unique means that you only have one answer. So if you do 4 plus 3, for example, there's only one answer to that. Okay, so we can say that the sum and product of any two real numbers will also be real numbers. And as we mentioned with the word unique, that it means that there's only one possible answer. Next we have commutative property. So the commutative property says that you can change the order of addition or change the order of multiplication. So here, for example, 3 plus 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 3. That is your commutative property. Same thing with multiplication. If we have a times b, that's the same thing as b times a. So for example, if we had 3 times 4, that's the same thing as 4 times 3. So in other words, the order in which I add or multiply does not change the result. And if you're trying to memorize these properties, which one is which, commutative, you see the word commute in there. The word commute in English means to travel or to move. So notice what's happening is that the numbers are traveling or moving, and it does not change the answer. So commutative property is the one where the numbers doesn't matter the order in which I add or the order in which I multiply. That is different than the associative property. The associative property says that if I have real numbers a, b, and c, then this would be true. So let me interpret what we have here. So if you're adding the three numbers together, it doesn't matter if I add a plus b first and then add c, or add b plus c first and then add a. So for example, if we had 3 plus 4 plus 5, it doesn't matter if I add 3 plus 4 first and then add 5, that'd give me 7 plus 5, or if I were to add the 4 plus 5 first to get 9 and then add the 3. Either way, we get 12 as our answer. Same idea with multiplication. If we have three numbers being multiplied together, it doesn't matter if I multiply the first two numbers first and then multiply the third number, or multiply the last two numbers first and then multiply the first number. So for example, if I had 3 times 4 times 5, I can do 3 times 4 first if I wanted. That would give me 12 times 5. Or I can do the last two numbers first, 4 times 5 to get 20, and then multiply it by 3 after. Either way, I get 60 as my solution. So when I add or multiply numbers together, the grouping or the association of the numbers does not affect the result. Now if you're trying to remember the difference between commutative and associative, you see the word associate in the word. The word associate means group, right? If you say that I associate with these people, that means you are together or grouped with that people. You associate with them. Same idea with numbers. The associative property says that it doesn't matter how I associate or group the numbers together. Next we have a few definitions in addition to our properties. So if you're adding two numbers together, so in the sum of a plus b, a and b are called terms. So every number that I'm adding is called a term. And then when I'm multiplying a times b, for example, the numbers I'm multiplying are called factors. Okay, so just a few terms to be aware of. Next, we're going to apply those properties for three different examples. Example 1, we are to simplify 34 plus 57 plus 6. So the associative property says that I can group together any two set of numbers. Okay? So if I wanted to, I can also change the order of the addition. So I can write this, instead of 34 plus 57, I can move the 57 and 34. Okay? And that property that says I can move the 57 and 34 is the commutative property, because commute means to travel or to move. Okay, now from here, if I wanted to, I could regroup this. So I have 34 plus 6. So 34 plus 6 are in parentheses. So I'm changing the grouping of the numbers. So that would be your associative property. Alright, so 34 plus 6 is going to be 40. And we get that based off substitution, which we've not discussed in detail, but we're substituting 34 plus 6 with a 40. So that would be a substitution property. Alright, and then 57 plus 40 is 97, which is again substituting 97 in place of 57 plus 40. So the key is knowing the difference between the commutative and associative property. Commutative is the moving, associative property is the regrouping. Next we have 8 plus 4m plus 7. So I can group together like this, the 8 and the 7. So we're actually kind of combining things a little bit. We're moving the 8 and the 7, the 8 with the 7, which would be your commutative property, and then we're grouping in this manner, which would be an associative property. So we're doing both at the same time. So then 8 plus 7 is 15. So we have 4m plus 15. Alright, so when you solve these, you don't need to write out the property every time, but it's important to know that you can do these things, and do be aware of the different properties and how they're different. Next we have multiplication. We have 3x times 2y times 5z. Alright, so I can move things around. I can put the 3 and the 2 and the 5 together because everything's being multiplied. So I can move things around, which would be your commutative property. And then I can put the x, y, and z together. So I moved things around and I regrouped, which the regrouping is going to be your associative property. We're grouping together in this manner. And what this does for me is now I can multiply the numbers together. 3 times 2 times 5, which would give me 30. So my answer would be 30 times x times y times z. Okay, we're going to finish with a couple more properties. Next we have what's called the reflexive property. The reflexive property looks like this, where we have a equaling a, or 4 equaling 4, or any number, any value being equal to itself. That is your reflexive property. Okay, next we have your symmetric property. This one says that if a equals b, then b equals a. Or maybe another example would be if x equals 4, then 4 equals x. And this will be important as we get into solving equations, because sometimes x will be on the right side and we can just switch it around so it's on the left side. And we'll see that pretty often as the course progresses. So bottom line, what this property says is that it doesn't matter which side is written first in an equation. It doesn't matter if the x is first, or the 4 is first, or the a is first, and the b is first. It doesn't matter which one is first in the equation. And lastly, we have what is called the transitive property. The transitive property says that if a equals b and b equals c, then a equals c. So this is kind of like a train almost. If you can imagine a train linked together. So a is equal to b, and then b is equal to c, so therefore a and c are going to be equal as well. So an example of this may be Mary is 62 inches. And then maybe Susie is also 62 inches. So if Mary is 62 inches and then Susie is 62 inches, then Mary and Susie are going to be the same height. So that is an example of the transitive property.